Thank you so much. It's always really hard to get up after someone says all these really nice things about you, because it means that then you're all expecting a lot. So, but thank you. That was really lovely. And what I liked most about it was the passion. Because we're all sitting here. You've had 2 days of great conversations, you've been able to interact with each other, you've been able to network with each other. I hope that you've learned new things, that you've been able to share knowledge, share joy, share vision. But what I really hope is that you have lit a fire under each other, that you actually have got the passion that will mean that your leadership will truly be sustained. Because what I want to say tonight, I really want to shake you up a bit. Let me be honest about this. I'm not coming here just to say really, really nice things about you, though I could, because you've all done so much and you've worked really hard in order to be here. But I want to push you, because the sign for me of true leadership are the people who have a vision that goes beyond themselves, are the people who have enough vision to understand the importance of working together, are the people who have enough vision to understand that if we simply think that we are leaders because we are given titles by other people, that is not leadership. That's actually very bad followership. I really hope that in the discussions over the past few days, you've really been thinking about the kind of leadership that pushes boundaries. Fareed has spoken about some of the challenges that our continent faces. Many of these are not new challenges. Many of these are issues that we have analyzed and analyzed and analyzed to death. We've become really good at developing policies to meet our challenges. And then we have a litter of policies that have been written and thrown underneath people's desks and ignored and not implemented. Your generation of leadership needs to change that. And the only way you're going to change that is to have the courage of your convictions. But more importantly, to know that those convictions have got to be more than lip service. It's really easy to talk the wonderful visions. It's really easy to talk about being a new generation of African leaders. What's not so easy is to put those words into action. What's not so easy is to stand up for your values and your ethics when you're in a room of people who are trying to make you do something the old way, make you do something the wrong way, make you do something that you yourself know is wrong, and that you yourself just last week was speaking about being wrong. It takes more than someone saying to you that you are a young African leader to make that true. It's going to take you earning the title of leader to make that true. Because at the end of the day, leadership is something that is conferred upon us by the people that we work with, the constituencies that we're meant to be working with and for. Leadership is earned, not given. And you have the opportunity to earn that leadership. You have the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of some fantastic leaders on our continent. It's really easy, I think, for people to talk about Africa and talk about our bad leadership, our leadership deficit. It's always easier to tear people down than to build them up. But you come into a world where people have fought for justice on our continent. People have fought and died. People have fought and been killed. We have had generations of wonderful leadership. Those of you from Ghana, we can go right back to Yaa Asantewaa, generations ago. We can go all the way through to our liberation leaders, whether we're talking about Nkrumah or Mwalimu Nyerere or Nelson Mandela. We have on this continent some wonderful leadership. We have got leadership that we don't acknowledge. How many of you acknowledge the leadership within your families, within your villages or within your towns that have enabled you to sit in this room? We are all privileged because we have had people in our lives who have taken the leadership, who have taken the responsibility, who have made themselves accountable for doing everything they can so that we can be the best that we can be. I had a grandmother who was telling me when I was 3 and 4 about how I could do anything and how I was never to allow someone else to tell me that I was less than I was. I had a father who made sure that he educated each of his girls in exactly the same way as he educated the boys. I had a mother who actually was the first person to push you and say, this is what we as Africans do. We are givers. We are mutually accountable for each other. We are responsible for making our country, our communities, our nations, our continent better than we found it. All of this is leadership. But we very often choose to ignore that kind of leadership. We ignore the community leaders. We ignore the leadership that we see, whether it's in civil society, whether it's in religious organizations, whether it's in the public sector. And we tend to think purely of elite political leadership. And we have to change that. We have to change that because it's not fair to the political leaders who are there, because no one is a leader on their own. You cannot make leadership work by yourself. You need to work with other people. But the other thing about it is that we all hold ourselves accountable. We come from traditions of collective action, and collective action speaks to collective leadership. And the important thing about that for our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation is that we had people to challenge and people to challenge us. If as a leader, you sit in a position where you only listen to people who agree with everything you say, you will fail, because people will not hold you accountable, you will not hold yourself accountable, and your visions will never be met. As leaders, you need to encourage the challenge. You need to make sure that you have people around you who, when you start to swerve off of the path, and it's a pretty narrow path, so it's easy to swerve off of the path, you need people around you who remind you of why you started this journey in the first place, who remind you of the ethics that made you work as hard as you have, about the ethics that motivated you to put yourselves forward to be leaders in different areas. You will need people around you who will walk with you and have your back and help you stay on that pathway. And you will need people around you who will remind you that you are only as strong as all of the people around you, that you are only as strong a leader as you have strong people around you. So I really want to challenge you. I want all of you, when you go back home to your different countries, to your different settings, I want you to be going back with a sense of humility around the achievements that you have had. because it's easy for us to get caught up in those achievements. It's easy for us to forget that part of our achievements, part of our leadership is about how hard we've worked, how much we've learned, the way in which we've approached life. But part of our leadership is about everyone else's sacrifice, everyone else who has given up something to make sure that we can be here. So what do we give up to make sure that we don't get into positions of leadership and shut the door behind us? What do we do, not just to say, I am bringing other people to the table, I'm going to bring other people who have been marginalized, who have been oppressed, who have been ignored, who have not had the same chances that I have. How do I not just bring those people to the table, but actually what I hope as young African leaders, I hope you're all going to say that you're breaking that table. Who needs 8 people at the table if you can build a table that can have 20? So I hope that you're going to be brave enough, that you're going to be visionary enough, and you're going to make those changes. There's a saying in North America that comes from the Native Americans that says, it's not that this generation leaves the earth to its children, it's that this generation borrows the earth from the children. That way of looking at what we have, what are our assets, and what are our responsibilities, I think is really important. You are young leaders. You know, some of us are old. I feel really old most of the time. And there's been huge struggles. And let me not, I don't want to be one of these people that makes you think that young people are going to change everything and the older people have changed nothing. We have got, as I said, generations of leaders who have striven for change on our continent. As a woman, I look at the choices my mother and my grandmother had, and I know that I am blessed to be in this world at this time and to have had people who have fought for the rights of all Africans, of African women, of African children, of African men, African communities. We now have choices that our parents and our grandparents never had. But there is still so far to go. When we look at our continent and we see the wealth of our continent, and yet that wealth is often being looted and taken away. Generations of looting of African assets. And why? Because we sell ourselves cheap. We do not believe in our countries, in our histories, in ourselves, in our characters, in our ability to change the world. And that's what you have to do. You have to break that cycle. You have to dream dreams. But it's not just about dreaming dreams. It's then about connecting your head with your heart, with your hands. Because if you dream and do nothing, it's a betrayal. It's a betrayal of everything that not just you have done, but that our ancestors and generations of our leaders have done. So I want you to act. I want you, when you see injustice, not just to say, oh, that's wrong, but to say, this is how we are going to change that. This is how we are going to fix it. This is how we are going to make sure that as Africans, our continent reaches its full potential. You cannot be a leader if you do not act. And many of us will sit in this room and think about people who have been given the title of leader, whether it's traditional leadership, political leadership, even some of our celebrity leadership that we have these days, which I'm a little dubious about. But We all know people who have had the title of leader, and they have done nothing with it. And they are not the people that you remember when you think about leadership. The people that you remember who are inspiring when it comes to leadership are the people who have achieved, not for themselves, but for their constituencies, for their people, for their countries. They're the people who have had the courage to make change. I've been really lucky in my life. I've been able to work with some of our really great African leaders, and it's been a wonderful experience. And I've been lucky enough to be mentored by people who make sure that you understand that leadership is not about the individual, and that change is not about the individual, but is about the collective and is about working together. The thing that I found I admired most about those leaders is that they walked the talk. They didn't say one thing and do something different. They didn't dream one thing and act differently behind the door. There is no difference between your public and your personal lives, decisions, and actions. And every time, as a leader, you stand on a platform or you sit in a room and you make a pronouncement which you contradict with your actions, you undermine people's confidence, not just in you as a leader, but in your generation as a generation of leadership, or in your gender. When we have women who speak of solidarity, but actually pull down other women publicly and privately, they don't just undermine their personal leadership, they undermine the leadership of everyone. When we have men who speak about justice and equality and then sexually abuse or attack other people in rooms, you undermine not just your leadership and credibility, you undermine the leadership and credibility of a generation, and in our cases, of a continent. We need, as Africa, as Africans, we need to believe in ourselves again. We need to believe in you. We need to know that you are going to be more, because we need to have more. We have got the most wonderful continent on this earth. We are rich in tradition. We are rich in heritage. We are rich in land. We are rich in youth. Africa is going to be the youngest continent in the world. By 2030, our demographics mean that young people will be the majority on our continent. Some people look at this and start saying, oh, what are we going to do to stop the young men being on the streets and being violent? What are we going to do to stop conflict? I don't think we think about it that way. I think we think about it as, my God, what an opportunity to have a continent where the youth are in the majority, to have a continent where the energy of young people, where the vision of young people, where the courage of young people is the dominant factor. That is an opportunity that we really should dream of. But we will lose that opportunity if each and every one of you, as leaders, does not stand up and take responsibility. We will lose that opportunity if each and every one of you do not stand up and say, these are the ethical guidelines by which I am going to operate. And we will lose that opportunity if you do not behave as your brother and sister's keepers. If you do not stop the person who you see doing wrong, whether it's at a dinner table or in a bank or in the business you set up or in the political system that you have to work within. You have amazing opportunities. You have proven yourselves to be hardworking. You have proven yourselves to be imaginative. You have proven yourselves to be really innovative. Your challenge now is to act on all of that. Your challenge is to remember all the wonderful words that you say to people in public spaces and make sure that your actions in private reflect those wonderful words. Your challenge now is to take people with you. Your challenge is to make people believe that your ethics, your vision, your approach, and your hard work make them want to say, yes, this is a young African leader. This is a leader that I can follow. This is a leader that I can work with. It doesn't matter how many scholarships you win. It doesn't matter how many fellowships you win. It doesn't matter how many people pin badges on you who don't even know you. What matters is what you do with the opportunities that you've been given. What matters is how you act. What matters is keeping a moral grounding, keeping an ethical guideline that will really motivate through every action you take. And that's what we're all watching for. It's more that we're all watching for that. It's that we're hoping for it. We're praying for it because our continent needs it. We need the change. You can bring that change. You are that change. But you need to act. You need to act ethically, and you need to act now. Thank you.